Mary Todd, The House of Music and Shadows, Chapter 1. This is where Mary's ghost story begins. Long before the White House, long before the seances, long before the world knew her name, a single candle burns in the red room. Its flame trembles as if afraid of the dark gathering around it. Mary Todd Lincoln sits before it, still, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the wavering light. Outside, the winter's wind claws at the windows. Inside, the silence presses closer, thick as velvet. Mary whispered, "Wait." The flame bends towards her as if listening, and in that moment the veil thins. Mary feels her son's presence, echo of his laughter, the warmth of his small hands in hers. But the dead do not come from nowhere. They come from memory, from longing, from the shadows of a life shaped by loss. And Mary's shadows began long before this night. Lexington, Kentucky, the Todd Mansion. Her ghost story begins in a house of music and shadows, in a childhood gilded with privilege and haunted by silence. The Todd Mansion stands on Main Street like a grand, brooding sentinel, 3 stories of red brick and white trim, its tall windows gleaming like watchful eyes. Inside, the air smells of beeswax polish, coal smoke, and lavender water. Servants move quietly, portraits stare down from the walls, and the floor shines so brightly that reflections shimmer like ghosts. The house is alive with children, laughter, footsteps, whispers, the clatter of toys. But even in all the noise, there are shadows, long-reaching shadows that pull in corners and stretch across hallways. Mary notices them. Even as a child, she fills the house watching her. At the center of this world is her mother, Eliza Parker Todd. Eliza moves through the home with a softness that warms every room. She smooths collars, brushes curls from foreheads, and adjusts ribbons with gentle hands. In the evening, she plays the piano in the parlor. Pale blue walls, tall windows, a chandelier that catches the lamplight like stars. Mary sits cross-legged on the rug, tracing patterns in the carpet, while the notes drift around her like warm light. Mary: "Again, Mama, again." Eliza smiles, with her eyes first, and plays the melody again. Mary leans her head against her mother's knee, feeling the vibration of each note through the floorboards. She doesn't know, she's storing the sound away like a keepsake, something she will cling to long after the music itself is gone. To Mary, her mother is not just a parent, she is the sun, the center, the warmth that makes everything else make sense. There is a tall mirror in the upstairs hallway, gilt-framed, imported from France, polished to unsettling clarity. Mary avoids it. Sometimes at dusk, she thinks she sees movement in the reflection. A flicker of shadow, a shift of light, something that doesn't match the world behind her. Once, she reaches towards the glass. Her reflection stares back, wide-eyed, solemn, too still. Behind her, the hallway stretches long and dim. In the mirror, it seems even longer. Mary: "Mama says mirrors remember." And the mirror seems to listen. The Todd children are a constellation, each bright, each different, each orbiting around their mother's warmth. The older sisters braid Mary's hair, read to her, teach her French. The younger ones race down hallways, hide behind velvet drapes, giggle during lessons. The house is noisy, chaotic, joyful. But beneath the laughter, there is a tremor, a sense that the harmony of the household depends entirely on one woman's presence, and Mary feels it. The night the storms roll in, the sky turns the color of bruised violets. Thunder rumbles like distant cannon fire. The wind presses against the windows. Mary stands at the parlor window, watching the trees bend and sway. The piano behind her is silent. Her mother has been in bed for 2 days. The storm feels like an omen, a warning, a breath held too long. Lightning flashes, and Mary sees her reflection in the glass, pale, wide-eyed, ghost-like. For a moment, she doesn't recognize herself. Eliza had just given birth to her 14th child, tiny baby boy named George. The house buzzed with excitement. Servants hurried. Siblings whispered, but Mary felt something else. A heaviness, a stillness, a wrongness that settled in her stomach like a stone. That night she stood in the dim hallway, clutching her doll. The gas lamps flickered, casting amber pools of light that made the shadows seem to breathe. A door creaked open. Elizabeth stepped out, wiping her eyes quickly. Mary, small, afraid. Is Mama sleeping? Elizabeth forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Elizabeth. She's resting, darling. But Mary saw the fear in her sister's trembling hands. Behind the door, her mother lay pale and trembling, fever burning through her body. Mary wasn't allowed inside. She stood in the hallway, gripping the banister so tightly her knuckles turned white. Doctors whispered behind closed doors. Her older sisters cried quietly in corners. Her father paced the hallway, boots striking the floor with sharp, anxious echoes. Hours passed, then a day, then another. The fever worsened. The newborn cried in the next room, a thin, desperate sound that cut through the silence like a blade. And then, silence. The doctor stepped into the hallway, face pale, spectacles fogged. Robert Todd stood rigid, hands clasped behind his back. Doctor, it's over. Robert's jaw tightened, his eyes closed for a single, fragile second, the only moment he allowed himself to break. Then he straightened, spine stiffening, grief swallowed whole. Mary watched from the staircase. Later she slipped into her mother's room. Curtains were drawn, the air was still. Her mother's hands, once warm and soft, was cold. Mary touched it anyway. Mary, Mama, please wake up. But Eliza Parker Todd would never wake again, and the warmth of the Todd home vanished with her. After Eliza's death, the mansion didn't simply grow quiet, it grew hollow. The rooms felt larger, emptier, as though the walls themselves had pulled back in mourning. The piano sat untouched, its keys gathering dust. The air felt colder, even in summer. Shadows lengthened, floorboards creaked at odd hours, mirrors seemed to darken around the edges. Mary began walking in the night, certain she heard footsteps in the hallway, soft, slow, hesitant. When she opened her door, the corridor was empty. The lamps flickered, as though someone had just passed. Her father moved through the house like a figure carved from stone, shoulders rigid, jaw clenched, eyes fixed straight ahead. He mourned the only way he knew how, silently, rigidly alone. One night Mary wandered past his study. The door was cracked open. Inside, Robert sat at his desk, head bent over a letter he wasn't writing. His shoulders shook once, a single silent tremor. By the time he opened the door, his face was stone again. Mary hid behind the corner, watching him walk past without seeing her. Within months, he remarried. To Mary, it felt like a betrayal. Elizabeth Betsy Humphreys Todd arrived at the mansion like a winter wind, sharp, brisk, impossible to ignore. She carried herself with rigid posture, chin lifted, eyes sharp as glass. Her footsteps echoed with purpose. Her voice cut through the air like a blade. She was everything Eliza was not. Strict, formal, emotionally distant, obsessed with property. On her first day, she stepped into the foyer and surveyed the house with a critical eye. Mary clutched her sister's hand. Betsy's gaze landed on her. Betsy, you must learn to stand straighter. She adjusted Mary's posture with two firm fingers. Mary flinched. No one had ever touched her like that. Betsy brought several children of her own. They entered the Todd mansion quietly, almost cautiously, like guests unsure if they were welcome. They were reserved, watchful, disciplined, unfamiliar with laughter. At dinner they sat stiffly, hands folded neatly in their laps. The Todd children shifted uncomfortably. Mary reached for a biscuit. Betsy, use your left hand. Mary froze. The silence was suffocating. The mansion grew colder, the piano sat silent, the laughter faded. One evening, Mary slipped into the parlor and pressed a single piano key. Betsy from the doorway. "That is not appropriate this hour." Mary's hand fell away from the keys. She learned to navigate the new household like a battlefield, watching, listening, anticipating, adapting. She learned to hide her feelings behind a practiced smile. She learned to swallow her grief before anyone could see it. She learned to sharpen her wit like a blade. In her bedroom, she stood before the mirror, smoothing her dress, to practice a smile, small, polite, unbreakable. "Mary, be strong." And the girl in the mirror obeyed. At dinner, political arguments erupted like summer storms. Slavery, states' rights, the future of the country. Voices rose, tempers flared, lines were drawn. Mary sat quietly, absorbing every word. Politics became her second language. She learned how to read a room, how to sense tension before it broke, how to speak with precision or stay silent with purpose. She was a girl born into privilege, but shaped by grief. A girl surrounded by luxury, but haunted by loneliness. A girl raised in a mansion, but living in the shadows of her own home. She once wrote that she was taught to appear strong, even when my heart was breaking. And that mask, polished, practiced, unyielding, would follow her for the rest of her life. One winter night, long after the lamps had been extinguished, Mary crept to the parlor. Moonlight spilled through the tall windows, silvering the piano, the chairs, the silent room. She approached the window and pressed her palm to the cold glass. Her breath fogged the pane. For a moment she imagined another breath meeting hers from the other side, warm, familiar, comforting, her mother's breath. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, the fog on the glass had formed the faintest shape, a curved line, something that could have been nothing, or could have been a handprint. Mary stepped back, heart pounding. The house was silent. The shadows were long. The air felt heavy with memory. "Mary, Mama, are you still here?" The silence did not answer, but it did not feel empty, not anymore. Outside, far beyond the quiet streets of Lexington, a young lawyer in Illinois was rising before dawn, stepping into a life he did not yet know would collide with hers. He was tall, awkward, brilliant, relentless, a man shaped by his own shadows, his own grief, his own ghosts. Mary did not know his name, not yet, but the world was already shifting towards him, drawing two distant lives onto the same path. And in the silent parlor of the Todd mansion, with her breath fading from the glass, Mary Ann Todd took her first step toward the future that waited for her, a future that would bind her to that man forever.